webinar. We'll just give her another minute or so, see if she comes in as an attendee. And Mark, were you able to connect with Joanne Sanos?
Oh, yes, on the phone yesterday.
Okay, great.
While driving, I was swearing in.
The things we can do mobily.
That you're not supposed to. Well, I won't waste any free time then. I'm glad to be with this group. Heidi knows that already, so we can wait for her. And, work as a team, and it'll be fun. It's not all gonna be fun, but you know what I mean.
Yep. I'm just gonna give her a quick call.
So, Mark, I'm Dan Morris. It's nice to meet you, and welcome.
Thank you.
I was just thinking of, there's the hands-free law, and if you're swearing in while driving, you've got one hand raised, right?
Thanks to the thanks to the speakerphones, though.
Yeah.
My son in Gloucester High gets his license tomorrow, hopefully. That'll free me up.
Well, I'm not getting an answer. So you do have 4 members of a 7-member board, so you have a quorum. Let's see. We could go through who would like to take the role of chair. And in terms of membership on the board, Noel, you would probably be the next in line if you'd like to try to chair the meeting. Otherwise, we can continue to wait a little bit longer for Heidi.
I'm willing to. Well, why don't we use our ex-chairman who started this
or
off?
Dan, if you'd like to take that role.
Use the new guy.
I don't mind, starting us through the agenda.
Okay.
Please, Dan.
Okay. Well, thank you for your trust in me. So we'll call this meeting to order. And Greg, before we begin, it would be helpful to know if we have any members of the public listening in.
We do. We have 4 members from the public.
Okay, and so we will give them a chance to speak in a few moments.
Okay.
So with the format, are we required a voice roll call?
Yes, so I'll just read the precursor and then we can take a roll call just to establish that there's a quorum. So this is the Open Space and Recreation Committee meeting of January 20th. Consistent with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings more than 10 people, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Public may not physically attend the meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time. The address has been available on the agenda as well as the calendar on the city website. In the event that there's a live transmission proves unworkable for any reason, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the meeting will be made available on the city's website as soon as possible. So roll call vote of members. Member Morris? Yes. Member Mann,
Present.
Member Paulin, newest member,
Present?
and Member Sargent.
I'm here.
So you have a quorum and the floor is yours, Mr. Acting Chairman.
Well, as I'm rather new in this role, I hadn't planned any chair communications, so I will move right into an introduction to our new member, and I will ask Mark Poland. First off, thank you very much for your interest in service to the community and specifically on this committee. I think you're coming at a very interesting time with the transition with some old members leaving, some new members right at a time when we're kind of expressing our respective interests and what we would like to advance through the committee, but also at a time when we're preparing for a revision of the open space plan. And we can certainly use your use your interest, use your ideas and your mind and your contacts with the community to make the plan as robust as possible. So welcome to the committee. I really thank you for being here. And I would just ask you if you wouldn't mind, I know you gave us a brief introduction at the last meeting, and if you wouldn't mind repeating that just so that everyone is fresh on that and the members of the public know who you are.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. My name is Mark Poulin, and I've been a resident here for 25 years. And I've worked at Applied Materials Ovarian for 32. And I've raised a family here. I have a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old boy, put them all up through the sports fields, coaching, assistant coaching, and serving on the Gloucester Little League board for 11 years. I love all the trails and the places and the fun things in Gloucester has to offer. It really is special. I mean, I say that coming, born and raised in Salem, New Hampshire. I only came here once for a field trip to the, Hammond Castle, like every other kid in that area. And years later, I got a job here and said this is going to, and instantly fell in love with it. And I'm just a shepherd. These processes last for 3 or 4 years. Different people. We were all in it for a little bit, and we can advance the process, advance things, be good stewards, and look at all interests of the city as a whole and work together as a team. I'm a project manager at work. We do, big multi-million-dollar projects, and we listen to people's requirements and not just get bombarded with people's ideas of solutions and things. What are the real requirements and needs of things that people are asking for? Try to listen to that and share it and make it all good at the end.
Thank you very much. And just on that point about requirements, we're paused right now with respect to our work on the open space plan, and there's some history to that I don't know that we need to revisit now, but we were up to the point where we were beginning to work on the planning for public engagement. And that's where, we would, I suppose, learn about what our requirements are and what the community is asking for, and then trying to figure out how to incorporate it in a thoughtful open space plan that would be an advice, an information document for the city council and the city government for the, the next few years, 5 years on record, but officially it tends to run longer between revisions. So thank you. So our next agenda item is the public comment. And Greg, I think you would have to control that.
Yes. So if any member of the public would like to speak, we typically provide for 3 minutes for comments or concerns that you might want to address to the Open Space Committee. And so if so, you can, if you're on a computer, you can use the raise hand function and I'll recognize you. I don't see anyone on a telephone, so that wouldn't apply. But there should be a raise hand function in the center of the bottom of your screen if you'd like to speak. And I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand. Okay. Oh, Dan, you're muted.
Managed to close my agenda.
Nope.
Um,
Okay. I can share it.
Thank you.
So one of the artifacts of this COVID situation is we've been generating so many meetings remotely, and many of the boards currently don't have minute takers that are sitting aside of them. So there's quite a backlog. So we will, again, here we're generating another situation where we have to generate minutes. But for the time being, we are looking to probably outsource somebody to try to help with the number of boards that have been operating remotely. So we actually don't have those two sets available for review at this point. So that
Okay.
brings us to section
Well-
number 4, business.
Greg, a question on the minutes before
Yep.
we move on. If we had these to contemplate today, there's only one person who was a member for those meetings. And
Yeah, so
do we
I
have a
mean,
quorum? Would we just have one vote in favor of
I
acceptance?
think Heidi was as well.
Okay, but she's not here. So I mean, but
So
would
just
would we have to
procedurally,
abstain?
you can actually vote on minutes that you weren't present for. But we do want to clear up some of those that will have a little bit of institutional knowledge of members that were on the committee at the time.
Yes, I probably have a copy of them somewhere with my comments, but not to hand.
Okay. Well,
You didn't send out agendas at all this time. So this is the first time I've seen the agenda.
Oh,
for
okay. I'm
today.
sorry. I thought the agenda also went out. But there were no minutes distributed. So we'll take that up once we have a complete set for those 2 meetings and subsequent meetings as well.
Wasn't Heidi available on 2019? That's 2 years ago. My goodness.
I think she was. Yep.
She may have been the note keeper as well.
Okay. Our next item then is this follow-up on the bike ped topic. Of course, the last meeting, Jennifer Donnelly presented, and I had several high-level takeaways from that presentation, and I will, I'll introduce this topic and then open it up for discussion. So my high-level takeaways from Jennifer Donnelly's presentation, of course, just for the members of the public who might not have been there, Jennifer Donnelly is the representative of Mass in Motion. It's a grant-supported position within the Department of Health for the city. She is working on several focal areas for Mass in Motion, but for the broader community, for the Cape Ann community. So she's hosted in Gloucester, but she's also providing her coordination and services and expertise to Manchester, Essex, and Rockport. And we're fortunate to have her on board. She presented findings of a survey, a list of questions that she's presented, and also a map that people can go onto the web, find this map and annotate it with the bicycling and pedestrian trips that they are taking around the city. And the idea is to find basically what are the areas that people are using, what are the roads that people are using, in an effort to ensure that, or to look ahead to making them as safe as possible, or perhaps building in some accommodations for pedestrians or cyclists. My high level takeaways from her presentation were that in 2020, We've seen a marked increase in cyclists and pedestrians in the community. There's interest expressed through the surveys of in making Gloucester more bike friendly and more connected via road and trail to our surrounding communities. Jennifer talked about a few trouble spots, or areas that give cyclists and pedestrians some pause before entering. Whether it's a road hazard, or it's a particularly busy area, or short sight lines. And another takeaway was that there's not a consistently effective means of interacting with the city on issues relating to cycling and pedestrian interests. And finally, a vision for integrating and connecting cycling and hiking routes and accommodations across the boundaries of Cape Ann is slowly coming together. It's what Jennifer is aspiring to and towards, and seeking support in doing. It's with Jennifer's presentation in mind, and it was with sort of my own prompting to seek a position on this committee that related to cycling, that I've come up with a few goals of my own for things I'd like to try to work through the Open Space Committee, and trying to find the best vehicle for that. Of course, the Open Space Plan is in the offing, and perhaps some legwork now will find its way into an expression about cycling and pedestrians in the Open Space and Recreation Plan. But we may be able to do, advance some of these ideas about safe cycling and cycling access and visibility outside of the plan as well. And so I had 5 or 6 points of things that I would like to try to do, during my term on the committee. And I think Heidi had in mind that, if I can express this as an example, each of the members may have some area of emphasis that they would like to work on. Ultimately, it would fit into the plan, but it also may be something that we can advance separately from the plan, and through the offices of planning and conservation, and of the other committees and departments that they coordinate with. So for the cycling example, my ideas for things I'd like to advance are working towards identifying hazards to cycling, and towards their timely correction. And just like to develop some sort of communication scheme or a collection point for identifying and expressing and sharing notes about hazards to cyclists and pedestrians, and then contacting and getting a quick turnaround on correction by whoever the responsible or department is, whether it's Public Works or the police or some other. Build and maintain a roster and means of communication with cyclists and cycling supporters, including businesses and commuters, who can be called on for ideas and support. So it's not just me coming up with these ideas of what would make cycling safer, but who else is riding? There's a lot of different reasons that people ride, and they would bring different ideas, and they're coming from different places, and may have encounters with traffic or with obstacles in the roadway that we can all learn from. And so having that collection point for those ideas or those problems or those accommodations would be really helpful. Establish and sustain routine and effective processes for two-way communications with the Department of Public Works to address safety issues and accommodations for cyclists. Establish and improve communications with other city departments and commissions and boards that may have jurisdictions related to improving cycling safety and access and visibility. You don't want us to work in a vacuum. Jennifer, of course, sits in the health department. Planning is certainly involved. Department of Public Works, we really need champions in the city council, and there may be a need to involve the traffic commission or the planning board or the police. And so basically trying to learn about where open space and where this topic sits within the community, within the city government, and making best use of the existing processes to advance our concerns. And finally, develop and move towards the city's adoption of a bicycling or intermodal plan that addresses cycling in concert with Mass in Motion. This is Jennifer's vision, and I think it's something that we can aspire to. Perhaps the open space and recreation plan is the vehicle for that, or it's some sort of appendix to that. That's still to be determined. But so these are the topics that I aspire to work on in the next several years, and I hope that in the course of our conversation tonight and subsequent to this meeting, I'll be learning more about the city processes and learn from Greg's great experience about just how to advance these ideas. So I'll pause there for your reactions or better ideas or whatever you'd like to say. And Noel?
Yeah, it seems to me that there are some areas, some dangerous, like along Lobster Cove in Annisquam. I mean, many's the time I've felt near an accident with a cyclist. And I'm not cycling anymore myself, but I never went that way when I lived up there. So that's just one item. Obviously, the width of our streets makes a big difference. I don't know how many of our, particularly the side streets, will accept another lane, a bike lane. Probably not many.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's all for now. Oh, yes, and I do think we ought to consider the ADA. We haven't done much for Americans with disability, and we should.
Okay.
That's trails in the forest as well as on the roads.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? I think that's Dave signaling.
Yes, I think to what Noel was talking about with Annisquam, there's a proposal to lower the speed limit to 20 with the state.
Speed limits don't work.
20 is plenty. They did a study of the speed in Annisquam, and they found that actually there was pretty good compliance. And part of that might be just because of the design of the streets, that it's traffic calming based on the way it is.
Dave, it's 127 that I'm concerned about, not Annisquam, the peninsula.
Okay.
There, in our previous open space plan, there was Steve Winslow had some data about speeds. It's now rather dated, but it's probably reasonably correct, and kind of the areas where there is habitual speeding. And I don't have that in front of me to quote it, but I think that these are really good points that Noel and Dave are bringing up here. And that's why, you can come up with an issue. There's a grading that's going to suck up bicycle wheels, or there's a really bad pothole, or there's a blind turn or something that cyclists are at risk at. But stepping back and saying, wow, our roads are really narrow, or this is a small community where you have poor sight lines, and so 20 is plenty. And having kind of a more comprehensive plan that takes into account speeds, traffic burden, directions, pedestrians as well as cyclists, and it's this concept of safe streets. Streets are not just for automobiles; that they have to accommodate all users. And so my aspiration is to kind of establish that communication and that a forum for that sort of communication, so that when there are changes or when money is available to make improvements, we can have a kind of a rounder conversation about, okay, what can and cannot be done in a particular road that runs this way, or that is this narrow, or has these parking issues and that sort of thing, rather than just swatting the little issues that are they're important to swat those safety issues, but having a comprehensive plan, I think, would serve the community better and the city better. I think Mark was trying to get in.
Oh, yeah, just, to further your point, I think the collection, we need to find a way to get the input to us, like you said, in a manner that we can digest it, prioritize it with a risk, like a risk register. Some things are gonna take longer to do a citywide plan versus addressing something smaller, maybe quicker. So maybe it's both some SNPs and some larger plans, but put them on a risk register, figure out which ones we can go after. There's gotta be low hanging fruit. But as we drill down into each one of those, though, that's when little things will come up about the traffic studies, maybe in little areas, and things like that. So find the portal to the information. We've already got a few on here hearing anyway, about, lanes and certain areas.
And the complement to this discussion is, okay, this is what I would like to advance through the committee, and what I would like to focus on in the open space plan. What's on your mind? Whether it's Noel is very fond of the North Woods, and perhaps has
And Dogtown.
yeah, in Dogtown, and is there some
Which,
yeah.
actually, that's another thing. I think particularly in North Gloucester, there's no alternative as a through route to 127. There are bypasses here and there, but nothing. I think it would be wonderful if a through route could be correct, it could be engineered to go from Gloucester, say around the hospital area, straight through to Rockport.
Are you speaking of a roadway for automobiles, or?
No, more of a pedestrian, a bike path.
Okay. All right, because you were surprising me if you were talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Although I do think that's something that has to be considered a roadway, because as the oceans rise, it's going to be more and more difficult to keep 127 in safe order.
Yeah. But I just mentioned, your own interest in Dogtown and the North Woods, and as an example of a perhaps a project area, something that you might like to try to advance, within the processes of the committee.
I've given it some thought. It would also tie in, we need better fire roads.
Has anyone else had an opportunity to sort of put those sorts of ideas together, and perhaps have a focal area that they would like to advance, through the plan?
As far as I know, the Dogtown Commission has not been meeting at all. I can find out more, and certainly we would have to work with that group in order to accomplish anything, even for bikes or ADA or whatever.
Yep.
And I'm just recognizing that our chairperson has arrived. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, and I deeply apologize. I just want to say thank you for going on. And I thought that the meeting was tomorrow because it's been on Thursdays. So please accept my apology and thank you for understanding. So I'm glad to see everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Heidi.
It's a happy day.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie. It's a happy day. So thank you. And
So
I'm just gonna say I'll catch up, and sounds like you're talking about going with what you're interested in pursuing.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and then Greg said that also that you were speaking about bicycles, but like follow up on Jennifer's meeting from last time.
right.
So-
So Heidi, I'm happy to turn the gavel over to you. But yes, as an example of trying to be responsive to what you suggested, that we have while we're waiting for the next steps in the open space plan, we develop our own ideas about and then draw in the committee, draw in the community, and try to find a way to advance, in my case, safe cycling in Gloucester, and what else might members be interested in. And so I was just transitioning to that latter part of the conversation about and Noel was chiming in about some ideas for the North Woods and Dogtown, and some pedestrian connections
Yeah.
that would cross the island.
Awesome. Dave, and welcome, Mark. I'm so glad to see you in person. It sounds like perhaps hi and congratulations.
Thank you.
Is it official?
Yeah, I was swearing in while driving.
Well,
So Mark was at ONA last night?
Last night.
Oh my God, that was a long time ago. It's been a really long day. I was listening in on the meeting. So that will go forward to the city council for the full appointment at its next regular meeting on the 26th.
Correct.
So, but sworn in as a member for 90 days, and I'm sure went swimmingly last night. So I'm sure you'll be a great
Right.
addition to the committee.
Yeah, and as far as having some ideas like all ready to go or something to add to the open plan is I don't right now, but I'm sure there's open things and the plan itself that needs work and prioritization, and some good partner with good ideas already heard tonight.
So I guess I'll just provide a little comment on what Dan had raised in terms of how to kind of listed off, I think 6 or so different things that he'd like to try to advance. And I think what's really going to be important is to coordinate some of that with Jennifer's work, because I think what will come out of what she's done is also kind of some next steps. And I think I spoke at one of our past meetings about my experience in Beverly. I've been attending the bike committee meetings in Beverly, and it's kind of a similar situation. I think, the current kind of climate that we're in has really, sent people outdoors, at least through the last spring and summer and into the fall. And maybe, people have kind of withdrawn a little bit. But, the value of having those outlets is extremely important. And I think maybe for some, it's been kind of taken for granted. So how to kind of plug in the pedestrian and bike interests in as you said, like, where's the inventory, or how is there a way to communicate the need, is one that I think that a number of communities are still sorting out, who should kind of carry that torch, and where does it interact between planning and public health. And obviously, with Steve's past role, there's obviously, a big importance between those two, to make sure that people have access and trying to, give people opportunities. And the open space plan has that, that and recreation associated with it. So I think it's entirely appropriate for priorities around that interest to be included in the open space and rec plan. But I'm just curious, also just in thinking about, I think it would probably start with that inventory work of where there are concerns or there are safety issues, connections, and those type of things. Whether that sounds like it's a little bit meatier than what would typically be included in the open space plan as priority. And there's been some track record and past successes of the open space committee of identifying that potential need and then moving into a separate effort, like the North Gloucester Woods study. So it might be something that either through Jennifer's work, I don't know if she'll have resources to take next steps, or whether there's the possibility of a joint CPA application for some funding for outside resources to help with something like the inventory. Or, I mean, because the alternative is, you have to have a real coordinated effort, like you said, if you did develop that roster of constituency that supports all of this, then somebody's got to take that all in and gather it and catalog it and try to figure out the best way to represent that and prioritize it. So I think there's a few options, and that's something that I'll follow up also with Jennifer and see where she sees next steps as well.
Noel, I saw you raised your hand, your little.
Yes,
hand, so, yeah,
well,
I'm gonna recognize Noel.
because the inventory was mentioned, and I'm very concerned about that and wonder what progress has been made or what is intended.
So I was specifically talking about Dan's kind of hazard safety inventory. Are you
Oh,
talking about?
different.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's still a viable question.
Yeah. So we didn't actually even place it on the agenda because of the stall. The project manager that we were assigned has taken a leave, and I'm talking with his supervisor to figure out if, are we in an indefinite situation, or if there's going to be another project manager that's assigned to work with us on that piece.
So Greg, that would be something you would ask at, like, is that something that you could just continue to report back on? Like, you'll let
I
us know
certainly
at the
can,
next
and
meeting?
I think,
yeah.
Dan, have you been in contact with Jennifer as well?
Oh, I was meaning about Courtney, like with him.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So sort of back to the inventory question of land, and like, well, right now that's a stall or it's not, there's no action on it, but is that an action item for you to do? Or, I mean, it sounds like you would know when it happens, but until
Yes.
that time, we don't, there doesn't really bear reporting on, but I
Right.
guess I'm at just hoping that, seems like you'll
Well,
ask for information when it changes with a
Mhm.
new person, like with that person's replacement. So we can,
Well,
yeah.
yes, as you know, I'd very much like to be involved with the inventory, but
Yeah, I
Well-
mean, again, I don't think this is a situation where, I mean, it's something that will be not presented as a cast in stone. It'll be something for the committee to react and respond to and truth test. So, and I guess I mean, let me get up higher in my chair for a second, because there was at oral communications at the city council meeting last week, there were some concerns around public input and public process. And just to make it very clear, with this effort, again, it's been a combination of things with not only the pandemic and when this committee would meet and constituting the committee and having membership and having the support that we have the technical assistance for on the other side, running into this situation with the project manager that was working on it, that we haven't even done any of the public engagement piece of this yet. So as much as that's going to be a challenge in the platform and environment that we're in, we are not even close to being there. So part of this is first the vetting of information with the committee to make sure that you're comfortable with what is going to be presented to the public in terms of kind of baseline and things that have been advanced since the last planning effort. There's that public input piece where that's all presented to hear, which was outlined before you came onto the call. To hear what currently people's concerns are, what's missing, what's needed across the board in terms of improvements to open space, potential acquisitions, improvements to public recreation facilities, or just walking, sidewalk, whatever that input looks like, feeding that into the planning effort, and then prioritizing that. And you are the representatives for the city to help prioritize that information And then again, the public gets, a look at a draft plan that says, yeah, I was concerned about that. It looks like that's been incorporated into the plan as something that's a priority. Or if there's a reason why something isn't included, there's some dialogue around why it may or may not. Maybe there's a different venue that it's more appropriate to be in, and that type of thing. So, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Greg. I see these special emphasis of the members as requiring our own initiative, kind of my own initiative on the cycling thing. And I would expect to be sort of the leader of that effort. And so I appreciate that, we're kind of paused for the plan, but I don't want to just wait. And so if I'm to mount an effort to get input from other cyclists, connect businesses that have an interest in cycling, those sorts of things, I want to make sure that I'm doing it in full compliance with open meeting law and any record keeping requirements. And I don't recall. I mean, yes, I took the training, but I don't recall anything specifically about subgroups and engagement with, outside in the name of outside entities, whether they're individuals or businesses, in the business or in the interest of the Open Space Committee. Is there a ready resource for that that we can read or to update on, or is it something you can brief us on very quickly?
Sure. I mean, typically, if it's an interest of the entire committee, and there's the desire to have a more focused agenda that's to a particular topic, there is, and again, looking that we have not a full complement of the committee yet. Very often a board or committee or commission could set a subcommittee, which would typically be, maybe 3 members of a 7-member board. You would still then follow the same open meeting law in terms of, posting a meeting, carrying on a meeting, conducting through the same procedure of how you would approve something, you generate minutes and all those different things. And then you report back. So it wouldn't be something that would dominate, an open space committee meeting that might have, 3 or 4 or 5 different agenda items on it. If you felt like it was something that needed the attention of a focused agenda. Individually, again, I think your particular, what you've raised, there is a question about, kind of structure. Is that something that kind of advances to the point of needing its own committee, or is it something that's ad hoc, that brings something in? As you said, how do you dial that back in? So say I don't know, we'll be hypothetical. You worked with a group of people that were kind of loosely associated, that cataloged a bunch of concerns, compiled it into something, and then wanted to bring it somewhere. I think it's appropriate to, again, just because of the topic and the nexus with the mission of the Open Space Committee, it could be brought to the committee. And then as a whole, the committee could advance it in some way. As you've pointed out, there's other avenues to also, depending upon what was being suggested, to bring it to the council as well. It's just a matter of whether it's being brought forward as something that's born out of the Open Space Committee or a loose association. So I think it needs a little bit more thought in terms of what's the best structure to do it. I think, again, the struggle happened a little bit in Beverly to try to figure out how to plug in. And I think thus far, it's not a by ordinance committee. It's pretty organized. Agenda is very focused. But it's again going to kind of feed back into, bringing proposals back to the city in some form, whether it's through the city council, open space committee, or, bringing information to the planning division, however it might be.
I'm thinking back on the process of the North Gloucester proposal, which was really a good thing. I mean, it brought a lot of attention to the problems and possibilities. There was no, I mean, there was a subcommittee, but it was mostly it was local people in the area. It was very simple. We just did it.
Well, I think
And
I
then
think
the
that was also,
professionals.
yes. So that, I mean, that was, I think the need was identified by the committee. And then that was advanced through community development with Steve's support to put together the CPA application, and then manage the consulting contract for that work to get done. So that, I mean, that's, again, I think I suggested that's another potential avenue. If there's a defined scope and the committee thinks it's a good thing to advance, then you can make that recommendation to pursue, a CPA application to hire whatever potential needs are to help inventory or advance, that particular aspect. I mean, it could go as far as, that pedestrian, cycling pedestrian planning piece as well. And then that, again, that could be something that sort of is project managed. Again, there's that little piece right there. We're short on project managers. But, again, if it's important enough, it's a priority of the committee and makes that recommendation to the administration, then that might be the way where some of that work, that consultant work gets reported back to the Open Space Committee or a subcommittee of it. And then again, you would kind of tie it all back together with review and finalization with the full committee.
Thanks, Greg. We're really grateful that you're here because you can guide us with some of this stuff that a lot of us are learning, and it's new to us. And I just want to acknowledge that you are a wealth of information. And also, we have limitations. And I just keep wanting to go back to the purpose of the plan. And since we are in this beginning month with a new membership where we're looking to identify what we care about and what our priorities are, sort of knowing, so we identify them and then what? And that's sort of the larger question that I see, or just, we've got some more veteran members and then some newer members. So I just hear that it's an opportunity, that we have opportunities, and there's already a lot of information that's been gathered. Dan, I know you have worked with people loosely, and I know that you've presented these concerns to me as a fellow cyclist and also as a member of the committee. So I guess I just want to I don't want to rush into anything or say that you need to come up with something now, but if we have something, we've self-identified, and then what are the next steps about subcommittees meeting casually, meeting with a group of people who are not formal members, and wanting to follow the rules and be in line with what's expected of us. And so, as a new chair, where learning as I go and figuring this out, I just want to say that I know there's already a person, Jennifer, who's collected data, information about cycling. Dan has information, concerns, and what my notes I wrote here was like engagement and communication. So there's already some people that have been engaged on an issue that people are connected to here at this meeting. And then the communication piece. How do we get the fact that this is a body that has, I would say, advisory power, or we can make recommendations, go through channels, just looking historically, but also a responsibility to look at that plan, to guide decisions that are made, whether it's complete streets, which I know DPW has not been mentioned. Like, what is our relationship to the DPW, and or making connections to the work that's constantly done here, and that I'm thinking specifically with cycling, but I guess just more generally pulling the lens back and to respond to Dan's point about cycling and information is just, so we have all this stuff, then so then what? So, I mean, I again feel grateful for Jennifer's involvement, her presentation last month, and just knowing that there's people within, paid people within our city's government. Like, at the end of the day, we're volunteers, we're advisors, we're an advisory committee, but that we have people that can help navigate and guide, what do we do with this, but so maybe I don't know, because I just talked a lot, and if anybody has any comments about that or wants to add on about cycling specifically, or about subcommittees, or personal projects, like if this has jarred something for you, or like, oh yeah, and I grant permission to also to have no interests, and just be like, I'm just figuring this out. But going back to the plan, the mission of the committee can be really good guidance for us, I would say. And I know I will do that too. So I invite any comments about, that which I just said, or clarifications needed. Yeah, Dan.
Just thank you, Heidi and Greg, for this conversation. It seems that the committee has been very open and welcoming of this topic, and I greatly appreciate that. But it seems like I need to do a bit of legwork on my own. Talk to cyclists, try to learn about businesses that have an interest in cycling, and do a little more legwork on trying to identify the community, and those of us who are interested in this topic, and as one piece of it, start collecting some ideas from them about safety hazards, accommodations, visibility, and access, and then bring that to this committee, and try and ask whether we have kind of the critical mass to support further work by a subcommittee. That's how it's shaping up in my head, and I just wanted to get your confirmation that that's a correct and a good approach.
Well, I would say my understanding is that is totally within your bounds, and also you have a lot of information, I would say, or my understanding is that this isn't not a new concern. So there is information, but maybe the piece that I'm hearing is identifying the community. So you're taking on doing legwork, but part of that legwork involves gathering your people and saying, this is important to me. Do you know that you can do this? Which I would say begs the further or more general thing of engagement, engaging our community, and how do we do that? So yeah, and would the subcommittee be just community members? Can the subcommittee be community members, or does the subcommittee have to be open space members? That's a question I have. Maybe Greg, you can answer that, or.
Yeah, typically it would be, the structure would be members, subcommittee of the open space committee, if that's the route chosen.
Yeah.
Again, there is the possibility of something beginning ad hoc. It's just, it needs to ultimately be brought back to a board with some authority or capacity to advance something. Otherwise, I mean, it's more, you know, kind of a free petition approach with like city council. I mean, anybody can always bring forward an idea. And obviously if it's a group that, or a constituency that's organized around something, you know, that's probably got a better chance than one person just going up and saying, I think we should all do this. But again, I think there might be an opportunity here also with working with the health department as well. You know, they have some limited resources right now, but it'll be interesting to see how that you know, how that gets summarized in terms of where it should go next. And that, so again, that's something that it'll be interesting to see how in depth the response has been from that outreach, and what Jennifer's next intended steps were as well. It may be that, you know, there's enough response, and it sounds like there's enough concern that there needs to be more resources focused on a next step piece. And again, whether that's something that gets gelled into a scope for a either a grant or other funding source, outside resources needed. You know, that's where those next steps would come. But again, I think any opportunity to gather information is always helpful. And it obviously Dan's got a passion. I do as well. I know where there are some spots where, you know, when I'm traversing the city, that I kind of grip my handlebars a little bit tighter, maybe my teeth. So you know, I think it's an important issue, and again, you know, some of this, I think some of Jennifer's work will also, you know, maybe round out how important it is to the community. I asked her if I could participate in the survey, and I can't because I don't live here. So there's a whole nother potential perspective and user group that's not associated with this particular effort that she's conducting, but you know, is equally as important. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that would prefer that we're just not on the road at all. So that's, you know, that's the balance.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Dan. Go ahead, Noel.
On with the agenda. I'm interested about the Haskell Pond issue.
Yes, well, before we get onto that, I guess I just wanted to quickly add that I am a part of the Community Preservation Committee as well, and we met last night, and there is money for open space and recreation projects. There's dollars committed, and we have very few applications in those fields or those categories. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but the funds are earmarked for different categories based, you know, affordable housing, historical, open space and recreation. And right now, the Young Legends Street Hockey is the recreation application that's in, and we've funded to redo the basketball courts at the top of Stage Fort Park into a street hockey court. So I think it's an exciting project. And we also did the Avis Murray tennis courts at the base of Stage Fort Park. So I guess I'm sharing this update with the information and reminders that if you know groups, we're looking for more groups to apply for these funds. We, meaning Community Preservation Committee. And a piece of our meeting was communication. How do we get the word out to local nonprofits? And so I say that here as well, that I'm committing to communication and engagement about our committee. Writing is something I like to do. And I know there are some media outlets here here at the meeting and also here in Gloucester and Cape Ann that could benefit from what do we do? Your voice matters. And how can we represent what you're interested in, what's valuable? So I think that's I think that's a good segue into the Haskell Street shooting range and the public here the part of the city council meeting last week that was about this. And I know that Mark was there. I was attending. Dan, were you there as well? Anybody else at that meeting? Dave, awesome. Greg, anybody else? I know there's some participants
No,
here.
I wasn't.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to defer to somebody else about, what they heard or what it was. I mean, I'm very glad that I was there. Does anybody else? I just want to make sure other voices are heard. Anybody on the committee who was there want to speak to what they heard or?
I wasn't there.
Well, I know you weren't there. Okay, well, I'll
I mean, for
share.
me,
Oh, yeah.
so personally for me, it was my first time really hearing what may have been going on for, weeks or months before that, right? Or even the history back to 2009, which I wasn't even aware of. So I was really taking it all in. If we're forced, I really want to find out about the mandate. I mean, I think we know it's a state mandate, but maybe some more details about, exactly how many rounds have to be fired. There was an article in the paper today about, why aren't they, editorial or something, why aren't they using the existing shooting range? So it's just time to absorb that. I'm still processing a lot of that. One thing I did learn, I was chatting with a police officer a couple of days after, and it could be something far less than 1,000 shots, rounds per, actually. As a matter of fact, that might just be a convenient number as a rough estimate, but it could be something as much as a third or half of it. Once we found out, I think I heard 50 or 75 rounds for some weapons. I mean, there's only so many weapons and so many numbers, and it's going to add up to a number. And that number is the number to deal with in how it's going to be dealt. So we should find out what that number is, and then it can be scheduled effectively, possibly, and improvements there. Anywhere it ends up, anywhere the shooting ends up. So
Does the, excuse me,
excuse me.
does the range and Haskell, next to Haskell Reservoir, does that include small arms as well as rifles? Or, I mean, what
Yeah.
exactly are the requirements?
What I heard was they're required to train on the weapons that the department has, I believe, and it was
With no specificity? What,
I think every weapon they have to practice with.
they have to
Yeah.
practice, right? Everyone has to qualify.
yeah,
on the weapon.
I actually, I read that in the paper and I thought, well, I mean, does that include pistols? Because pistols could be diverted to sportsman's club or.
Again, once we know what the numbers are, I guess, that's why I'd be
Right.
interested to find out what the deal.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, go ahead. The chair recognizes Greg.
So, obviously the use of the range has not been consistent. There was a period of time where it wasn't utilized. And I believe last spring, there was a modification to the ordinance that reactivated the use of it. It does appear from what I heard, being in this environment, there were a lot of people that did not feel like they were noticed or really understood what changes were being made. And then they very apparently knew exactly what was happening when the range went into use. And so, barring any change by the city council, the intent is that there's a period of time between, I can't remember the end date, but I believe it starts in May, perhaps through the fall, where there's the certification of each officer in the police department has been kind of alluded to, has to be trained on, recertified on all of the arms that they might use in the department. And so, that's kind of a necessity at this point. There isn't an alternative currently. So the intention is, again, unless there's a council action that will proceed for this coming season of certification. I think the chief had indicated that it's 8 days out of that time window that would be needed. But I can also say that without any, further action, the administration is looking at alternatives. I don't know that there's really an opportunity for any of those alternatives to be implemented this coming year. And I think the chief had committed to trying to create an advisory group, making sure that people are very well noticed in advance. I don't think it's utilized on weekends, so there's a lot of ways that, again, I think as has been indicated, 8 days, they will do their best to make sure that people are aware of that. And then longer term, I think alternatives are going to be explored to try to figure out a way to potentially not use that location. Looking at, there were all sorts of alternatives that were even raised by others of, independent locations from the city or cooperations with other entities. So I think all those are going to be evaluated to try to figure out a cost-effective way that minimizes the impact to the community. So I think, the only thoughts that I had, and I was listening for, and if it's something that, again, if it's 8 days, I'm not sure what you do, for folks that have to listen to it, because obviously, it is what it is in terms of
Not a crowded neighborhood.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to minimize, somebody that lives next to something that they didn't know that was happening, and all of a sudden they hear this, and it's as somebody that's walked through Dogtown, when you get close to the range, it's not very comfortable to hear. But any which way you look at it, I think they're going to try to explore alternatives that will minimize that.
The Sportsman's Club, I think they only shoot rifles rather than handguns. Handguns they restrict to the basement, which is really quite soundproofed.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
No.
Dan, I want to recognize Dan Morris. Thanks.
Dave was also had something.
Oh,
to say.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I understood it, Greg, to be a 2-week window in the spring. I think it was May, and a 2-week window in October. And then the possibility, the option of every Wednesday in the summer. And there was a requirement for notice prior to use. So it could just be an eight working days in the spring and 8 working days in the fall, but there's the further concern that they would exercise that option during the summer. And there was no one spoke against the need to train. No one was against the police and their proficiency. It was all about how it would affect the neighborhood and the recreational uses of that area. And it's on that latter point that I'll demonstrate my ignorance of matters, but I was just wondering if Greg knows what status that property has with respect to public lands. And is the the use of it as a gunnery range has some exclusivity to it. You have to close it off, and you have to, put up certain features, and it requires that an area that is, used for recreation is now being used for an express purpose and being changed for an express purpose. And I was wondering if it had any status as a public land, and that whether that had been reckoned.
So I don't believe there's any specific designation. Those are part of the lands that are part of the watershed. That particular area is downstream of the watershed. So it would be something different, for instance, if that was, a piece of property that had, conservation restriction on it or that type of thing, where there's a change of use. But I think, again, I don't know how long it's, when it first came into existence or use. I think it easily dates back to probably 2000 or maybe even before then. Dave knows, I'm sure he knows. But so the temporary use of it, I don't think is really the issue. I don't know if there are parameters around, fencing or anything like that. I'm sure the chief is aware of what's required. For instance, the Sportsman's Club, similarly, I mean, it's kind of a very open area that's, I'm not sure that that's fenced either. But, so I don't think there's necessarily an issue with it being in operation and not being in operation from the recreational use standpoint. I think that the use of passive recreation in the watershed is also something that's, I think it's a great asset and an area, but it also comes with similar concerns of just, the unintended users that might be in that area as well, because it is public water supply. So there's no question there's a little bit of tension there that, we all hope that people, go into the woods, enjoy themselves, clean up after pets if they bring them with them. That's probably one of the biggest concerns. And I know that's not unique to this area as well. There have been concerns around Goose Cove before. Everybody likes to take their dog out. Well, when they're outside and you're in those areas, you have to curb your dogs as well. And please don't leave it hanging in a tree in a bag, because that doesn't help anybody. So from the use perspective, I don't think it's an issue. From the safety perspective, I would, certainly defer to the chief in terms of what's needed for the limited amount of time that they're using it. And again, I think, it was heard very loud and clear and across the board, from the users of it to the people that live around it and the administration. Everybody wants to come up with a solution that minimizes the impact.
Thanks, Greg. Dave?
Hi.
Hi.
In the interest of full disclosure, I can hear the gun range from my house. And I have for maybe 20 or 30 years. It's nowhere near as loud now as it was before 2009. There were automatic weapons that I was hearing perpetually before 2009. Now, I'm glad it's the gun range and not people hunting out of season. So it makes me feel a bit better. But I don't think that's really where our focus needs to be. I think our focus needs to be that people can walk through that area, or mass mudders can drive through that area safely. And I heard that there may be some conflict with mass mudders by redesigning, a trail. And I also heard that Chief Connolly said that he'd be willing to work with people to redesign trails and things like that, so that people would still use that area. And I would encourage people to take that avenue. The chief does have to, according to the ordinance, post that it is a gun range and to make sure that people aren't there. To the question of using the Cape Ann Sportsman's Club, in the O&A meeting in the spring when there was this application, he indicated that the Sportsman Club cannot take care of the new mandates from the state. And so they have to look somewhere else or to do that. And he congratulated and thanked the Sportsman's Club for taking care of them from 2009 to this point in time. So the sound, even though it's there, and I can understand other people's concerns about that, it's nowhere near as bad as it was before 2009. And even when there's hunting, we hear gunshots. So our main concern, I think, really should be making sure that people can walk through that area safely and feel safe at the same time. And I think there's an opportunity for compromise. It's actually a good problem to have because people are using that area and they're getting out and they're walking. And so it's nice to have this problem.
Dave, did you get a sense of where that potential conflict was that potential trail conflict?
Yeah, it was near the shooting range itself.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an access issue.
Right,
It's also, in terms of an egress, say, so somebody coming out of town, like that, somebody
right.
drive the loop traffic that goes through there. And if they all of a sudden come to a shooting range or something, that they have to go back around the other way or something. So some forms of turning back somehow. It might not be on the same trail. We don't know, you know. So.
There, well, there
Re-
is a
Regis-
route around Haskell's, and there's also a connection to
Right.
Ravenswood and blah, 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 and on the other side.
How do we alert those people before they come? I think someone brought up that they might ride
Yeah.
a while or hike for a while before they get to. Of course, they're getting closer to gun range, but issues like that, making public awareness and safety, I think we can
Yeah.
is in our purview in here.
So this to me, will say thank you, Mark, and thank you, Dave, for those perspectives, and Greg as well. I feel this issue, while I'm hearing, Greg, that nothing's really going to change this year, even though you were using the term 8 days, which sounds like it came from Chief Conley, like that it's really only 8 days, but then there's this potential for every Wednesday, and that this might be what we have to work with. But how can we keep people safe, barring any changes or any action on our part? How do we keep people safe? How do we communicate to the neighbors so that they can get out of town if the gunshot is traumatizing to them? Because at that public meeting, Noel, there was one public person who said, I'm in favor of this and I don't have any problem with it. And I'm not sure how many people were against it or spoke out with concerns, but a lot. You could find out, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to give the wrong number, but there were many more people that were speaking up with concerns about safety. And so again, what is our role or interests? Mark, you said that you had some numbers and some interests too, or just like that you're learning. So I would like to bring this up again at our next meeting and see what people either came, like what next. But as our own committee, can we, no, it's too early to make a statement about it, I think, but to prioritize safety of both people that walk by, neighbors, and our police department, because, loud and clear, we support our police department in training. But to keep people safe, we don't want to have an unnecessary injury or fatality. And compromise is not easy, but I think that just that I don't know the answer, but I do know that communicating and safety are, those are the things that I really want to prioritize, whatever form they take, or supporting our city councilor or that ward councilor rather, if they're going to have another meeting, or being there, or so. Any other questions about that or comments? Dan, I know, were there. Any other comments or anything that you want to add as a neighborhood person or a attendee? Or
I'm at the far reaches of the neighborhood. I don't know that I've ever taken notice of the gunshots. I guess I'm not, given where the issue is, I wonder, how the committee, our committee, expresses itself. Our advice was not sought, and that's the choice of the council members, and the chief. And so whether and how we insert an opinion, I guess is what I'm trying to grapple with a bit.
Yeah.
And I as well, and that's why I asked, like, what is it, what is in the purview of this committee to weigh in on? Exactly what, some areas are, defer to other departments, for example. So let's focus on what is in our wheelhouse to speak on. And of course, we can raise the other issues. We may not be able to solve them ourselves. So we could be a collection of interests as well, as a focal point and a voice, as well as and serve that function.
Yeah, Dan, I
Oh,
see your hand. Are you
Uh,
finished? Yeah.
Just to kind of wrap that around is that I have not been back to the old plan and the documents and the inputs that went into the old plan. But we may have something there from public input from, decade and a half ago, about that property. And, so if we're going to express something, maybe a factual response, for the information of the council. This is on our inventory and it's noted for these purposes. And, this community said it was a valuable resource to them for these reasons.
Yeah, informative, that we could
Right.
just be like a conduit of information and people do with it what they will. But, then that way it is not taking a stand or being even advisory, but it is presenting information that maybe is heretofore not known about or not officially known about. It's more anecdotal or, yeah. How does that sound, Greg?
So I think, there's certainly some information that I can try to confirm before the next, again, information is important to have. And I think, Charlie spoke at the meeting as well. This was a priority access point, kind of a gateway to a pretty significant open space area. There were some improvements made for parking as well. And, it's getting heavily utilized. So, what I'm hearing in terms of, the concerns, if it got to the point of wanting to put something advisory, and again, I don't think these are probably anything that hasn't been heard and needs to be addressed. But an understanding of what the potential limitation would be for access, how people will be notified, and in particular, those that are coming from the south. Again, I don't know how this happens in terms of whether it's a notification of the full day. Is it a limited period of time? So just kind of understanding what the limitations might be. Again, what the ordinance says versus what's believed to be the number of days that there might be some limitation, and then just again, I'm sure everybody's greatest concern is safety, particularly if there's any two uses that are going to be trying to occupy the same space, and it creates a safety issue all the way around. So I'm supposing that some of that information will probably be developed in terms of how to notify people, the number of times it'll be limited. And if there's any question or concern about rerouting a trail or anything like that, I think that falls within the committee's wheelhouse. I mean, a proposal should be there. There should be some way of vetting that. Now, whether that's taken over by another body or not, that's something that you would certainly or should be asked to weigh in on.
Thank you.
I think Dave's given us the.
Oh, yeah, Dave, thank you.
Hi. To that end, is there any way of outreaching to the mass mutters?
Question.
Good question.
Noel,
Yes, I can't remember his name, but the watershed management, I should say the drinking supply manager,
He's not there
DPW
anymore.
employee. Is he still around?
No.
He is not.
Oh, well,
Well, I guess, Dave, what would be the purpose? I know it's another user group, and I think the police department probably has some interaction with them as well.
Yes, they made an agreement with the police, and the Mass Mutters have a general agreement.
Right, if we're going to recommend that access points and trails be redesigned, we ought to make sure that they're not in conflict with Mass Mutters
Okay, yeah,
or with the shooting range.
yeah. I haven't heard that as a specific proposal. I don't know. Was that from the meeting last week or?
It was implied.
Okay.
Well, we know we have a lot of good information and also points of view represented here. And I really am glad that people are so engaged here in the community. I think that's a really good committee. I think that's a good start of our fledgling group. And for one, would like to be contacted, whether it's me or whether I say, well, this person is more handling this. But, you know, if Greg said that the chief is creating an advisory group, I would say, well, is that about the neighborhood or is it is it about stakeholders? And could we be part of that group of stakeholders? Because by virtue of being part of this committee, we are, you know, stewards, if you will, of open space and recreation, and this falls under that purview. So I'll just say, again, back to communication. How do we make sure that before we have an opinion that we say we think this or that, how can we be part of the conversation? Because I think that we have institutional knowledge and important perspectives. So that's what I would say. And I would say if, you know, that we should carry this over as an agenda item for February. Although are we still on the meeting every other month? So that would be a March meeting. And, you know, maybe by then, I mean, it sounds like things could be the same, things could change, but what can we do? So I would like to present carrying this over to our next meeting. Unless people have other things to say about it or other questions or people want to commit to working on something to report back on it.
I'll reach out to Mike Ramos at Mass Mutters.
Yeah,
He was my assistant coach for last 3 years in baseball.
excellent. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I think they're a really important resource.
Yeah. Get his perspective on it, just to.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dave, when you were talking about the shooting, so you're closer to the Sportsman's Club, is that correct?
No, I'm closer to the West Gloucester.
Okay. Yeah.
But I know the Sportsman's Club, and there is, you know, outdoor shooting range there as well with rifles.
Yeah.
Which I hear regularly.
Yeah.
Right. I'm familiar with both areas.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments or questions about that?
So I would suggest that unless I hear differently or there's new information, if the next meeting date that we had scheduled, and now that there's no St. Patrick's Day parade, it probably won't bother anybody, was actually for Wednesday, the 17th of March. But if there's something that seems like it's more pressing or actionable, or there's new information, we can certainly circulate among this group to call a meeting. You know, we only need a few days to do that. We can kind of keep that middle of the month as a placeholder in February. Otherwise, it would be March 17th.
Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday, March 17th. And hopefully by that time, that's a couple of more meeting cycles.
Yeah.
I know the administration has been, you know, there've been other candidates that have put their name in with interest in the committee. So hopefully we'll have a couple more members as well.
Just taking a look here. discussion of committee priorities. I guess I would just like to add on for committee priorities before the other matters that you mentioned dogs and dog walkers. And that's one of my main forms of recreation these days, not so much the bicycle. And when Stephen Winslow did a survey about open space, our dog walkers are a large part of our open space and recreators. So I'm interested in coordinating and communicating with Friends of the Dog Park and I don't know what other dog groups there are, but this piece about the watershed, the dog poop, whatever, what's our piece on that? I don't think anybody would argue about, just the importance and value of cleaning up after dogs and valuing our space, our open space. But even if it's not, your dog, I don't know, just, I guess I want to bring up dog walking as something that I'm interested in as a 2021 or the dog community. As part of our committee, and that's something I'm interested in. So, other business that is not reasonably anticipated, anything, or it is 5:33, and in the interest of time, I do want to acknowledge that we have some participants here. And if anybody has any questions or wishes to speak or comment, you can raise your hand using the yellow raise hand icon.
And I'm seeing none.
Yep. Okay. So if as chair of the meeting, I'm entertaining a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and I'll do a roll call vote.
Excellent.
Member Wakeman,
Yes.
Member Mann,
Yes.
Member Sargent,
Yes.
Member Morris,
Yes.
and Member Pollan.
Yes.
Okay. Have a good evening.
Yep.
Thank
And
you,
we'll
Greg.
see you, at a minimum in 2 months, but maybe next month.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Happy
you.
day today.
It's
Great to
Yes.
see everyone. Thank you.
Take care.